بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Inshallah, today we'll continue our talk on the life of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh. As in the past couple of talks, we talked about the conquests during the time of Uthman bin Affan. We'll continue on, and inshallah today we'll talk a little bit more, a little bit about his campaigns or the battles that happened during his time towards the east, and then we will talk about against the Byzantines as well. As far as that's that, and also just a quick summary of what we talked about last week. Last week we talked about the death of the Persian king Yazgard, and then afterwards we talked about how the Christians they expressed their sorrow towards Yazgard's death because of his link through his mother's side, and also they built what you call a monument for him for his body. And then we talked about the campaign of Al-Bab and Al-Balanjar, and the killing of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. As the question was raised, this was a different Yazid, of course, than the Yazid ibn Muawiyah who became the Khalifa later on. And Khalifa, or the ruler, actually, because he was not the legitimate Khalifa. So anyways, and then we talked about how the Muslims used to look at the fighting in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then we talked about the dispute that happened, or the first of the signs of the fitna during the time of Uthman bin Affan, when the people of Kufa joined the army of the Syria, and there was some disagreement about who's the one who's going to be leading the army. And then we talked about Abdullah bin Amr radiallahu anhu's conquest that included the Mavrud also, and Al-Ahnaf's treaty with the people of Balkh. These are the some of the things that we talked about last week. So today, inshallah, we'll continue on from where we left off. And when Abdullah bin Amr returned from his campaign, he appointed Qais ibn Haytham as the governor of the Khurasan. Now, after the Khurasan, there was one of the generals, Qarin, came with the army of 40,000 Turks, and he was met by Abdullah ibn Khazim al-Sulaimi, and he had only 4,000 men along with him, compared to the army of 40,000 with against the army of 4,000. So the Muslims had the army of 4,000 here. But the way he tricked the army of Qarin was in a trick it, or you want to call it the battle plan that he made. So he put 600 of the men in the front of the army, and he told them to put the fire on top of his spear, and they marched towards the army of Qarin, and in the middle of the night. So now you can imagine that in the middle of the night, we are not talking about today's time, day and time. We're talking about the time there was no electricity, these kind of things, or the places were not light up like that. So it was dark, but you can imagine that how it would have looked like 600 men with the fire on top of their spear, and they were coming. The army was moving towards the army of Qarin. Now, after that, then Abdullah ibn Khazim, what he did, he came with the rest of the Muslims, which kind of was surrounding the army of the Qarin, and that kind of create a strange kind of chaos in the army of the Qarin, and they tried to run away from the battlefield, and the Muslims came out victorious. They collected a lot of spoils of war as well, and after that, there's this Uthman. There is a couple of things to understand about Uthman bin Affan's his skill regarding fighting in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the way he, in his time, the Islam expanded towards the east and the west, because there is a kind of a misconception that surrounds the life of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh. And this misconception is more of in general by Rafidis, and in some cases you find from the Shia and the Orientalists that who talk about Uthman bin Affan in a manner that as if he was a weak person. While if we really closely look at the amount of or number of conquests that happened during Uthman bin Affan, which contradicts all these misconceptions in reality, that shows that all these misconceptions had no basis. Because he is the one during which at the time right after Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, when he passed away, there was the rebelliousness started coming from both sides, from the Persians and the Byzantines, and they wanted to, or they were trying to at least, to take back the lands from the Muslims. And Uthman bin Affan is the one who took care of all these rebels that were rising up from both sides. And we find that in his time, not only that he was able to subjugate these rebels and restored the Muslim power from all those regions, but rather we find that there were quite a few advancements happen during the time of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh as well. And we have been talking about that. We'll talk a few today again, inshallah, as well. So we get an idea of the life of Uthman and the personality of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh. He was, in reality, he was a very sound in thinking. He was very swift and very cautious, and his actions were very deliberate about what he was doing. And also in his time, because of that rising up of all those rebels, Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh not only took care of those rebels, advanced the conquest, but he was able to put outposts to protect the lands as well. So for the future, these kind of things would not happen. So Uthman bin Affan's time, he made sure that these kind of outposts were created where the Muslims were expanding. And obviously, these things would have not happened if Uthman bin Affan was not shrewd in his thinking when it comes to that. And these things are very clearly defined in many of Islamic historical books that include books like Tariq al-Tabri or Tariq ibn Kathir, and so on and so forth. The brothers and the sisters who are more interested in going into the details of that, they can find the details regarding that in these books and other historical books which are written by the Muslims. So we have to be very careful about when we read the history of the Muslims. There's a lot of historical work has been created by the Mustashriqeen or the Orientalists with a different frame of mind or different goals that they had in their mind that they wanted to achieve by distorting the history of the Muslims. And talking about that, just aside the issue, when we talk about the history in general, when we talk about from the Islamic perspective, we don't use the history as a sources of Islam or source for the deen or the usul al-fiqh, all those things. We use the hadith, that is true, and hadith is collected very differently than when we talk about the historical events. And of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the one who came with the wahi, and the wahi that was sent to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the form of the Quran and the Sunnah. They are both preserved, and this is a different discussion to have, but so we should understand that there is a difference between the way the ahadith were collected and when we talk about history or historical events. So if something is coming from the wahi, which is preserved through very detailed kind of a science that is behind collection of the hadith that was used, and that is different than to say history, because hadith is collected with narrations and all the chains. The whole chain is preserved as well. The people who are reporting an incident or saying or an action that happened to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so that's, as I said, this is a separate discussion for us to have, but to just have an idea when we talk about the historical events and the hadith. There's a distinction about that. Okay, moving forward. So when it comes to there were conquests that started happening after the East. The conquests started happening in the towards Syria. And when I'm talking about Syria, so when we talk about East in general, we talk about the Persian Empire that includes today's Iran and Central Asia and so on and so forth. Now, when we talk about the Syria, so we are talking about, so that was more against the Persians. And now when we talk about the conquest of the Syria or conquest of Sham, that is more against the Byzantines. Now, so we already talked about that last week regarding when Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he wrote a letter to Al-Walid bin Uqba radiallahu anh, in Kufa to tell him to send a reinforcement to his brothers in Syria. After the army returned back from Azerbaijan, he sent 8,000 men led by the Muslim ibn Rabi'a. Now, Salman ibn Rabi'a, sorry. And then the Muslim prevailed over the enemy after penetrating the land of Byzantine, and they were able to collect the spoils of wars and taking prisoners and so on and so forth. But when it comes to sorry. Okay. So there were some of them. The Byzantines had formed. The Byzantines themselves, they had formed an alliance to fight the Muslims who had invaded Armenia from Syria. So the commander of the Muslims was Habib ibn Maslama, and he was very crafty in warfare. So he decided to attack the enemy leader Murian, and during the night time. So his wife, Abdullah bint Yazid, she heard about his intention. So she said, "Where will we meet?" So his response was that he will meet in the courtyard of Murian or in the paradise, meaning he was going after the enemy's leader. And he said, either we will meet in the courtyard of Murian, meaning he will be victorious, or in the Jannah, meaning if he is the one who will be martyred in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anyway, so they attacked, and they defeated the Byzantines. And when he came to the courtyard of Murian, he found his wife already waiting for him here. She was there before him even. So Habib ibn Maslama, he continued his conquest and in the lands of Armenia, Azerbaijan, which he conquered either by the means of treaties or by force. And Habib ibn Maslama al-Fihri was one of the prominent commanders who fought Byzantinians in Armenia. And he is the one who was successful against them. And then he continued invading the Byzantine lands beyond the border of Mesopotamia, and conquered many of the areas which were under Byzantine, including Shamshad, Malatya, and others. In 25 years after Hijrah, Muawiyah attacked the Byzantines and reached Moria as well, where he found the strongholds between Antakya and Tarsus. And he left a lot of Muslims from Syria and Iraq. And when I'm saying Syria, we want to understand Syria means Sham. Sham means could be from Palestine, could be from Lebanon, Jordan, or Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Syria from today's perspective. So those Muslims can be from any of the regions. So he left a lot of Muslims over there because he found a lot of empty land as well over there. Okay, then there is another interesting thing that happened in the life of Uthman bin Affan, which has not happened in the history of Islam yet, and that was the Muslim navy or the campaigns that started in the time of Uthman bin Affan through the sea. As far as the navy of Muslim goes, or to have any kind of a conquest through the sea, in the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, Muawiyah ibn Sufyan, he was a governor of the Sham, and he wanted Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh to go and have campaign by sea. And he told him that the Byzantinians are so close from Homs. He said in one of the villages of Homs, the people can hear the barking of their dogs and the crowing of the roosters. meaning he just wants to make sure that they are so close, we have to go after them. Now, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh he was kind of convinced by Uthman bin Affan, but as usual, Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, he wanted to consult the others as well, and he consulted Amr bin al-As. Amr bin al-As was another general, famous Muslim general, the one who opened Egypt as well for the Muslims. Now, when he asked Amr bin al-As about the sea, so he asked him, describe him the sea and those who sail on it. What I'm thinking about. So Umar was asking him, I am thinking about it. So Amr bin al-As wrote to him and saying, it is like a huge creature being ridden by small creatures, and if it stays still, it will scare you, and if it moves, it will make you lose your mind. There is no certainty about it and great doubts about it. The sailors are like worms on a stick. If it tilts, they will drown, and if it is safe, so you will be astonished. Basically, Amr bin al-As radiallahu anh, he kind of gave him the information that would change Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh's mind regarding going for the campaign through the sea. So when Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, he heard what Amr had to say, or he read the letter of Amr bin al-As, he wrote to Muawiyah saying that, know by one whom Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who sent Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the truth, I will never let Muslim campaign by sea. By Allah, a Muslim is dearer to me than all the Byzantinians have. Stop suggesting that to me. Meaning, he is not after what the Byzantinians have, rather he would save the Muslims. Now, as far as Muawiyah goes, so obviously in the time of Umar al-Khattab, he had to follow the command or the orders from the Khalifa of that time, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh. But the idea did not leave the mind of Muawiyah. And Muawiyah radiallahu anh, when Umar al-Khattab passed away, and he still had this idea in his mind that he wanted to go after the Byzantinians, and there are different reasons. It's not, let's not think incorrectly here that as if Muawiyah was after the wealth or something. There are different reasons that Muawiyah and the Muslims were looking for the Byzantines. Now, so he really wanted to go and open the land for the Muslims. And when Uthman became Khalifa, so he brought this matter up again. Now, Uthman considered it, and Uthman replied by saying, I am aware of how Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh responded to you. And when you ask him for permission by the sea, so he was aware of it. So now Muawiyah continued to insist, Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, that he really wanted to go, and there are major benefits for the Muslims to go and travel by sea to Qabras or Cyprus. Now, when he wrote back, Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he gave him a conditional yes. And Uthman said to him that if you want to go to by the sea, then you better go with your wife. So that was a condition that Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anh, he told him that you have the permission if your wife also, you take along your wife also, otherwise no. And then the Khalifa, and Uthman bin Affan also said to him, within the conditions, he said that do not select any other people, do not select the people do not force them basically, or do not draw the lots for them. If anybody wants to go, then he has to go by his own will. Do not force anybody, do not do the draws or any of those things. If anybody wants to go by their will, then take him. So now Muawiyah, when Muawiyah read the letter of Uthman, so he started mobilizing the people to travel by the sea to Cyprus, meaning, of course, he is not going against the command of the Khalifa, but he is letting he let the people know, and people were the large number of people who wanted to go along with Muawiyah as well. Now, so they wanted to go from there's an area called Palestine, Akka, and from that coast they want to travel from there to Cyprus or Qabras, which is about I think it's less than 200 miles from there. Now, when Muawiyah he prepared the ship, needed to transport the campaigning of the army, he took the port of Akka, as I said, as a departure point. And he took his wife, Fakhita bint Qarza, with him. And Ubadah bin Samit, radiallahu anh, he took his wife, Haram bint Milhan. Now, Haram bint Milhan, she was a maternal aunt of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just want to mention one of the hadith regarding her, because it has some relevance to this. This hadith is reported by different books of the hadith. One of them, the hadith which is reported in Tirmidhi, that says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to visit, and this hadith reported by Anas bin Malik radiallahu anh, and mentions the hadith, and the meaning of the hadith is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to visit Haram bint Milhan, who would offer him meal, and Haram was the wife of Ubadah bin Samit. Once Rasulullah visited her, and she provided him with some food and started inspecting, doing his hair, Rasulullah. Then Rasulullah slept, and afterwards he woke up smiling. So then she said, she said, I said, what causes you to smile, O Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And he said, some of my followers who were displayed before me, meaning in the dream, as fighters in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, riding on a ship, this ocean, who were kings upon thrones, or like kings upon thrones. So I said, O Rasulullah, make dua for me, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make me among them. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam supplicated for her, made dua for her, and then he lay down his head to sleep. Then he woke up again, and he was smiling, and she asked again, what caused you to smile, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And he said, similar to what he said earlier, she said, I said, oh Rasulullah, supplicate to Allah to make me among them. He said, you are the earlier ones. And he said, oh Haram wrote on, sorry. So he said, you are one of them. Now, Haram radiallahu anha was a maternal aunt of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the wife of Ubadah bin Samit, one of the Ansar. And then when she went along with the army of the Muawiyah, she was right after she got off from the ship, and when she was trying to mount one of the rides, she fell from the ride, and she broke her neck, and she passed away, and she was buried there. So she was kind of she fulfilled the dream that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw regarding she would be one of them, and she and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was praising that army. Now the Muslims, even though Muawiyah, of course, did not force, because Uthman bin Affan did not allow him, and the condition was that the people should not be forced to go for the army, but still there's a lot of a huge army of the Muslims gathered around him, and they really wanted to go for it. And this is, let's not forget that we're talking about the time of Uthman bin Affan. Muslims were already have tasted the life of luxury, but these Sahaba and Tabi'een who were there, they really understood the purpose of life. They really understood that they are the ones who are the carrier of this deen, and they have to take this message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the rest of the world to show the justice from the creator of the heavens and the earth. And that this was their real push, or the force behind it, for them to gather around Muawiyah, and they wanted to go towards the Byzantines through the sea as well. Now, this battle that the Sahaba, they wanted to go towards Qabras or Cyprus, was in the 28th year after the Hijrah. Now, when the Muslims, they traveled from Akka towards the Cyprus, we see that in reality Muslims were not really after invading the Cyprus. Cyprus was more of a place for the Byzantines it was like a resting place. It was an island in the middle, so it was more of like a resting place, or while they are moving whichever direction they are going and conquering the different lands or fighting with other lands. So it was it's an island in the middle, close to Sham, and that's like for them to re-energize before they go towards Sham from there. So they would stay there and collect the information of the movements of the Muslims and all those things. So this Cyprus was becoming a thorn for the Muslims, and Muslims wanted to make sure that this the way the Cyprus had been used by the Byzantines should not be used by the Byzantines against the Muslims. Hence, when the Muslims landed there, after, of course, Haram, when she passed away, and then Muawiyah, he wanted to consult the Sahaba. And among the Sahaba, there were great Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that include Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, Abu Darda, Abu Dar Ghaffari, Ubadah bin Samit, Wathla ibn Asqa, and Abdullah ibn Bishr, and so on and so forth. There are many Sahaba and Tabi'in that Muawiyah wanted to get their opinion, get their advice to how to move forward. So they discuss among themselves, and then they send the word to the people of the Qabras, of the Cyprus, that they are not there to invade them. They wanted to make sure that this area is not being used against the Islamic State at that time in Sham. And because, as I said, the Byzantines were using Cyprus for as a rest station and to get re-energized over there. And also they were able to collect informations of the movements of the Muslims and all those things. So this was the main thing. Now, the people of the Qabras, they did not want to make any kind of a deal with the Muslims. So the Muslims, they besieged the capital of the Cyprus, which is Constantina, not Constantinia. Constantina was a capital of the Qabras or the Cyprus at that time. Not talking about Istanbul, it's different. Talking about Cyprus, and they besieged them, and it was not too long. As one of the books talk about, it's a few hours, and these people, they came out for the treaty. Look, they were not really in the favor of the Byzantines either. It was more of Byzantines were using them because of the power that they had. So when the Muslims came for the peace treaty, in the beginning they were not going forward. When the Muslims besieged them, now they had no other options. So, but they offered conditions to the Muslims, and the Muslims also stipulated conditions. The conditions stipulated by the people of Cyprus was that the Muslims should not stipulate any condition that would cause trouble with the Byzantines. So now what they came up with, the treaty, was like this: the Muslims conditions were this: the Muslims would not defend the island if it was attacked by the outsiders. The outsider would not tell the Muslims about, the islanders, the people of Qabras, they will tell the Muslims about the movements of the Byzantines. So that they are not, Muslims are not creating problems for them, but this they have to provide them. And also these people from the Qabras, they would give the Muslims 7,200 dinars yearly. And they would not help Byzantines if they try to attack the Muslims and tell them the secrets of the Muslims. So, and then after this, the treaty that they had, because they surrendered and they had the treaty, Muslims returned back to Sham. And this campaign was the first campaign that Muslims had through the sea, and it was a victory for the Muslims, and that shows that the Muslims can engage into the naval campaigns as well, and they showed their competence in this. And that was a very useful campaign for the Muslims, because after that, it's not only the Sham, because the Qabras was safe, but for the future, it was useful for the Muslims to protect the Iskandariya also in Egypt and against the Byzantines, because the sea was one of the things that the Byzantines were using, and Muslims have not used it yet for the battlefield or go for the battle. So inshallah, we'll continue on next week from here on towards what happened, the victories that Muslims had in the direction of the Egypt also, and so on and so forth, inshallah. If there's any questions or comments about today's talk, I would like to answer them if I can, inshallah.
Yeah, awesome. I got a question.
Just 1 second, okay.
Okay.